Hi, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, wherever you're listening to from today. I'm in the East Coast, and my good friend Oscar's in the West Coast. So some of you guys are 11 a.m. time, and some of us are 2 p.m. today. We decided to collaborate and come together today to talk about multifamily with the ADU play, of course. So I'll be sharing my input today in regards to the ADU play. And then I have my good friend Oscar who's going to talk to us about financing, but also mindset, right? He's very big on mindset. And I think that that's really going to help us set the tone to understand both strategies and why I think it's the best play for 2024/2025. But I'm going to hand it off to Oscar and he'll tell you guys a little bit about himself and then we will get started.
And by the way, that mindset aspect of it is it's beyond 2024, 2025. So
Oh yeah, that one's
just
forever.
just a little
Yeah.
bit of a side note. So, but yeah, Stephanie, hey, always great collaborating with you. You're a great human. You're a great friend, a great professional. And for those of you listening or watching, if you know me, I'm all about keeping your circle lean and mean and going deep with the people you know, like, and trust. And great things will always happen. So my name is Oscar Gastelum. I've been in the financing space for over 27 years. It's crazy to think that. A majority of my background is in traditional financing when it comes to mortgages, which I think gives me an edge on the private money side. But decided to go heavy on the private money side a few years back. This is where I found my new passion. It's definitely a B2B type of platform, and there's just continues to be growth. But as a private money lender, we are nationwide. We have a big appetite from anything between your traditional fix and flip, bridge loans, ground up construction, multifamily, commercial, and a lot of stuff in between. Now, that may seem like it's a broad net, and it somewhat is, but we are not focused, like I mentioned earlier, on doing business with everyone. We like to have options for the few people we like to go deep with. And I think that that's where we carry most of our value is in those relationships because we're having growth conversations with people. And that's, to be honest with you, I feel like that's what gives us the edge and makes us different.
1000%. I mean, you and I are both very intentional about who we exchange energy with, not just
Yeah.
who we're exchanging, deals with or transactions or even relationships. I think the
Right.
energy and that mindset is a huge component, which is why you and I get along so well, right? Because
Yeah.
there's a lot of synergy there, and we're both in alignment with being super strategic, not only with how to structure deals financially, who we structure deals with is a lot more important, right? And that'll
Yeah.
come as a byproduct. So we like to make very intentional relationships with people. And today we're going to talk about, like I said, financing. Oscar does an amazing job of highlighting the good stuff, but we're hopefully going to give you guys some hacks as well on how to vet the right people. What does an actual like ideal property with an ADU play look like? And I'll give some insight on that. So let me share my screen. We have a very short presentation. This will be about 20 to 30-minute conversation between Oscar and I, and then we'll leave it open to Q&A. So if you guys have any questions throughout our conversation, there's a sidebar where you can ask your questions and we'll get to it towards the end, or we can also be super engaging and answer these questions as we're going. So if you guys can see my screen here, I probably won't be able to see the chat since I'm sharing the screen, but maybe you can help me with that, Oscar. And like I said, the slides are just there to help us stay on topic because both of us can go off, to different
Yeah.
conversations.
We're not short of words.
Right, right. And we can
Yeah.
go on forever. So let's see here. Why is it not?
And while you're pulling that up, I just want to add, when we express the importance of, collaborating with the right people, the right bottom match people.
Right.
I have always encouraged people, look, if it's not with us, do it with someone, right? You have to know, like, and trust the person first. And if it makes sense, then everything else can fall into play, right? And everyone holds themselves accountable to higher standards. So always a big advocate of that.
And I think one of the best ways to tap into that, let's say you're new to the multifamily space, for example, which is something that's kind of new for me, right? I've been in the real estate space on the residential side for over 10 years, but now transitioning into multifamily, I'm kind of going back to basics, right? And one of them is networking. So being very intentional with the networking events that you go to, or the networking events that you host yourself, right? Oscar and I met through a networking event that I had out in Solana Beach, and we hit it off well. I mean, there's nothing like that, face-to-face interaction, and once again, that energy up front that you're able to vet, and you kind of know, right? You follow your intuition, and you know if this is the right person that you want to get into business with. So today, the highlight is going to be multifamily, tied with financing, how to structure that, and then also the ADU play. So I think for context, maybe we should tell people like what is considered multifamily, right? And then we can kind of take it from there. We'll talk about what is considered multifamily. When does the financing change for specific types of multifamily? And then we'll kind of dive into the ADU play aspect of it. So starting off with multifamily is multiple units, right? Think of it as a duplex, a triplex, a fourplex. That's considered multifamily, anything more than one unit. And you can quickly go from single family to multifamily with the ADU play, right? Let's say you have a single family home and you're going to add 2 to 4 ADUs. That property is essentially going from one unit to multiple units, right? So that means it's considered now a multifamily property. Now, in the multifamily realm, there's different types, right? You've got your smaller multifamily units that are 1 to 4 units, and we can talk about the financing with that. Anything above 5 units, that's when financing, changes a bit, and I'll have Oscar talk about that. But just to give you guys a glimpse, right, of like what is considered multifamily, and then we can dive into larger multifamily development projects if we do get to that point. If not, we'll have to have a part 2. But anything else you want to add, Oscar, in regards
Yeah,
to
I mean, just to kind of piggyback on what we're touching on, it's from a financing perspective, typically anything 1 to 4 units is still considered residential, right? So that can give you options to traditional type of financing. And I just want to clear up, it's 5 plus, not anything over 5. It's from 5 units plus. Typically, even up to 10 units, depending on the lender. Of course, you can get DSCR type program. Now there are levels, right? I think you're leaning towards that. There are levels to the multifamily. Typically, level 1 is usually 2 to 10, right? And then you can skip depending on lender, usually from 11 to even 20, 30, up to 50. And then there's, the next level to that is anything over 100. There's different types of financing. Different lenders have appetites for different types of multifamily classes, right? And that's something that you need to be made aware of when establishing a working relationship with a lender or private money lender, is make sure that they have an appetite, not only in that class, but in the state and price points that you're looking into. I mean, I've seen cases, and we're one of them, where typically they don't have an appetite for, investors don't have an appetite for units within that multifamily, anything less than 500 square feet. Right. So there are levels to it, but yeah, I think that's the simplest way that we can put the multifamily and what that means.
Yeah, and I think for some people it can be a little bit confusing, right? Because technically, you're right, 1 to 4 units is still in the residential realm, but it can also be considered multifamily, right? 2 units, 4 units, just smaller scale, but the financing still pertains to the way we do financing in traditional and residential. And yeah, of course, there's levels to it. I think one thing to kind of talk about when it comes to multifamily and ADUs is understanding that there's a 25% density rule, which means you can convert 25% of the existing structure, right? And now some of those laws are getting a lot more feasible. There's a couple bills out there that will allow for multiple ADUs on one property, which would exceed that 25% density rule if you know what you're doing and if you have the right team around you. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. I'd say some of the other benefits about multifamily and why we're even talking about multifamily is because it's really the only way to cash flow right now, right? And it's something that you're able to scale. Buying one single family home requires, I think, the same amount of energy than going out to buy 10 units. And there's definitely a better way to scale the 10 unit, than just one property. Cash flow, as I mentioned, property appreciation, tax advantages, value add play with the ADU. And then some of those things that you have to kind of keep up with when it comes to multifamily, you are dealing with a different, type of avatar. So you really have to stay updated with market trends, the demand for multifamily housing in your market. So really understanding, what's happening in your area so that it helps you make better decisions when structuring these deals. And then we'll talk about how ADUs complement it. I touched a little bit about that right now with the 25% density rule, but we can bring some case studies for you guys to see. Now, regarding financing, I guess we could start at a basic level, just give somebody like an overview of what would it look like for someone who wants to finance a 4-unit, right? And I know that you're more in the private money space, but you have so much knowledge and experience in the residential traditional space. So just touch on, how valuable I think the FHA rule is in regards to like a 4-unit, which potentially can become a 6-unit, right? If you can add a couple ADUs to that.
Yeah, I mean,
And
if
then we can
you're,
talk about the private money stuff.
yeah,
But
no,
let's
absolutely, absolutely. So with respect to FHA, which I've always been a big fan of, if you're someone that doesn't own a property right now, especially if you're young, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be young, but
right.
a good strategy play is trying to pick up something that has 2, 3, 4 units. So you can generate not only some rental income, but FHA allows you to come in with 3.5% down, which is the least amount down aside from maybe a VA loan, right? Going
Mhm.
into units, that's going to allow you to come in with the least amount down and get the biggest bang for your buck. Because I mean, obviously, if you're and you have to occupy, I want to make sure I highlight that with an FHA and a VA loan, you have to occupy the property. And I'm trying to remember, I can't recall if it was a year or 2 years, but the intent to occupy and occupy for that period of time. I've
Mhm.
seen many people purchase the units, live in the front unit, rent out the other 3, and what they're collecting in rents in the other 3 is enough to cover the mortgage, right? Especially for some of these college areas. If someone's young and willing to have a parent co-sign on the mortgage for them as a non-occupant co-signer for them to qualify, this is a phenomenal strategy play for you to start taking advantage and start building wealth for your kids if you're the parent, or if you're a young adult. This is a great way to start investing in real estate if your plan is to own doors. The strategy behind that is either one, you end up making the next move, right? You can move down in units, right? But if you're going to 4 and then eventually buy 2 units, you're going to require a little bit more. You can't have 2 FHA loans at the same time, especially within the same area, and work your way up to that single family residence, right? That's a play.
Mhm.
Another play is if you have the 4 units, like Stephanie, you said, and the property has the ability to build, right? That's a long-term play. Allow that property to build equity, right? The easiest and most inexpensive way to do it, give the property 3, 4, 5 years. You have enough equity, then you can pull an equity line, a home equity line for the cost of construction to build 1, 2, 3, 4 units, whatever it is that you need, right? And before you know it, you go from having 4 doors to having 8, right? And you came in initially with a 3.5% investment, assuming you used FHA. So it's a huge strategy play. I mean, we've heard it, right?
Mhm.
If you're in a relationship, before you get married, try to invest, right, individually, and each of you buying that FHA, those 4 units, right? So by the time you get married, you have 8 doors between both of you, right?
Yeah,
Slower
exactly.
is faster. So we're so eager sometimes to take that leap, but if you strategize it, you can position yourself to start building some real wealth sooner than later.
Yeah, and then to add to that, I would say, the fact that you can leverage some of the other units to cash
Yeah.
flow long
Hmm.
term is a little bit difficult in places like Orange County, even San Diego, LA,
Hmm.
County. But what
Hmm.
I see people doing are midterm rentals or,
Yeah.
as you said, catering to these college students, travel nurses, housing insurance, corporate stays. All of that falls under the midterm rental category. and that sort of 2x's what the long-term rental would be. So it's just another way to really add flexibility and really, increase that cash flow. Now, in regards to how can a private money lender like yourself become a strategic partner, let's say we're kind of past that first phase. We've gotten over that first hurdle. You bought your first property, 4 units, now it's 6 units with a couple ADUs on there. And you want to maybe do a 1031 exchange to, something bigger, or, sorry, not a 1031 exchange. You want to actually scale to something bigger.
Right.
At what point do they actually reach out to you, and then you kind of take lead and see if it makes sense for you to become a strategic partner? And then tell people, like, what is private money? Let's kind of give them a quick overview of that, and then some examples of how you integrate all of that together.
The best way I can describe private money, and I'm quoting myself on this, is one business lending another business money to do business, right? Because typically at that point you're establishing an LLC, so you're now a business, right? And the doing business that means there's money to be made, right? And if I can tell you one thing is, as a consumer, you need to take off that consumer hat and stop thinking you're applying with Bank of America, right? Or any of these types of institutional type lenders. You have to look at it from an investor standpoint, right? And it's the cost of doing money. A traditional private money lender understands that these are all short-term loans, right? And a traditional, say like a fix and flip, or even some of the ground up constructions, typically the terms on those are 12 months. Why doesn't a traditional lender, for the most part, not have appetite for that? Because there's not enough money. They actually lose money if you're paying them off in 3, 4, 5 months, right? So they don't have an appetite for that, nor is that their market. And that's completely respectful of that, right? But for the private money lender, we understand that by establishing a working relationship with you, that this is not a one and done. We're not just going to finance you. You're going to stick to this mortgage for 10, 20, 30 years, right? We understand that there's a play for you to step in and say, hey, you're going to borrow this money. So with our money, even though it's at a cost, you're going to factor in the cost. With that money is going to allow you to make much more, in short, right? And with units, kind of segueing into the next play, with units, I'm a big fan, right? And the numbers for the most part always pan out, is with the BRRRR approach, right? So you buy, you rehab, you refinance, you rent it, and you repeat, right? So the big play, if you're coming up on, because you force equity into the deal, right? A traditional private money loan, let's just say you're new to private money, you're going to range right around 15-ish, maybe 20% down, right? It depends on the number. There's not a fixed amount, but the lender is willing to lend you 100% of the rehab. So rather than buying 4 units, I'll use that as an example, and buying it at current price and renting it based on its current condition, on what the rents are going for, great. And you may need, as an investor, you may need, a lot more than 20% down on 4 units, right? If you're not going private money, if you're going the traditional route. Though, if you go private money, we will lend you by putting, again, 15 to 20% down, but we'll let you borrow 100% of the rehab. So if you're putting an additional 100,000 into the property, I'm trying to go the wrong way here, into the property, we're willing to lend you 100% of the rehab costs, which of course that 100,000 to rehab is going to force equity into the deal, right? So now that property, by the time you're done rehabbing it, is going to be worth X amount. When it's worth X amount, that same property that you bought at a more aggressive price point is going to allow you to increase the rents right out of the gate, right? Typically that's a strategy play, right? You buy it, we give you the money for the acquisition, for the rehab, you finish it, right? One of two things is going to happen. Either you're going to turn around and sell it for a profit, right? Or two, we refinance you, or you get a lender to refinance you into a long-term play. DSCRs are very popular in those 10 units and under, for the most part, your traditional DSCR. You roll into a DSCR loan, right? Which essentially the property, aside from your equity position and credit, as long as the property pays for itself, in short, you're able to obtain a DSCR. So DSCR is a lot cheaper, of course, in private money. It's a happy medium. So it puts you in a strong position to stabilize the property. Now, looking forward, if that same property you have the ability to build, in that time, typically to do a BRRRR, to fix it, refinance it, it's going to take you about 4 to 5 months, right? You stabilize the property in that time, you could have, or you can start upon completion, start working on plans and architects, to get plans approved to build,
Hmm.
right? That may, let's just say hypothetically, that takes you 12 months, right? The property is already generating income. At that point, you have a choice. Either one, you can leverage equity from another property for the construction cost, or more than happy to step in, refinance the existing loan into a full-fledged construction loan and lend you 100% of the construction cost. And then it's basically a rinse and repeat, right? Let's just say 6 months to build the units, you build it. Upon completion, we refinance you, assuming it's under 10 or so, under a DSCR, and then you just added those doors. Not only that, you forced equity into the property, because the return on building, the cost of building versus the return on value is a lot greater. Just as important it is to force equity in the deal by fixing the property up. And I would say honestly, that's like the easiest way of gaining doors and while pushing equity, because then at that point, upon refinancing, even after building, you can refinance and cash out. As long as you stay within a healthy loan to value, cash out if there's room, you grab that money and go and start the next project.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think the timeframes are very crucial because, with the BRRRR method, typically, as you said, it's 3 to 6 months. But when you're looking at some of these ADU projects, because we're talking about multifamily and ADU, I always like to stress the time frame with some of these ADU build outs, right? It's not going to be a 3 to 6 month rehab. You're really looking at, 9 to 12 months if it's a conversion. If it's a ground up, we're looking at 12 to 14 months. So I think it's important to kind of take that into consideration and just understand why it's so important to vet the people that you're going to work with, right? The architect, the contractor, or if it's a design and build firm, making sure that they've done this several times so that they can meet these timeframes, right? And I don't know if you want to add more to that.
Look, you're speaking my language right now, because it's a couple things. And I use the example of, even on the resale, you can work with an experienced real estate agent. Experience can mean, hey, I've been doing real estate for 20, 30 years, and that's great. But do they have experience specifically in this space and working with investors? Okay, that's one. Yeah, just as much as a GC or the builder, they may have experience, let's just say doing fix and flips, so they don't have experience doing actually building ADUs. Right? They may have 20, 30 years experience as a GC, but if they don't have specifically experience in this space, and I had the option, I definitely would choose for those that have the experience in the space. The architect, I mean, everyone's got to have the experience in today's market, because rules and laws continue to change, and making sure that things are done properly. And I mean, you hit the nail on the head, right? As far as expectations when it comes to timeframes, they're not fixed amounts on top of that, right? It's a gauge on what people have experienced, depending on the city and how much workload they have and the response time and the relationship that maybe the architect or the GC may have with the city that can give you some leverage. But always be prepared that there may be delays. And it's very likely that there will be. So you need to be financially prepared to say, what does that look like and how much is it going to cost me?
Yeah, I like to really highlight that because many times people want to go the inexpensive route and it's going to cost you a lot more. I mean, some of these ADU companies, if they really have developed strategic relationships with the city, it really helps streamline the process, which saves you time and money at the end of the day. And with legislation changing constantly with ADUs, it's hard for the city to keep up with that. So you really have to know that the architect that you're working with is staying up to date with all of the legislative, activity happening, and same for the contractor, because those are two different realms. Working as a flip investor versus working as more of a long-term.
And let's be frank with respect to the GC. Just because they're the cheapest doesn't mean it's the best. And to be frank with you, 100%. If you're comparing 3 GCs and 3 bids, and this one's the highest, and of course this one's the lowest, doesn't mean this one's better. And doesn't mean just because this one's more expensive than the other 2 that it's expensive, right? It's just a little bit more costly. And the good GCs, right, the good builders, their focus is not to be the cheapest. They want to make sure they deliver a quality product and being able to stand by timelines and protect your money, protect your investment. So what you think you may be saving on the front end with a cheap GC is going to cost you a hell of a lot more on the back end. So you need
Yeah.
to kind of pick your poison. That can, and let's be frank, that's the same thing with private money, right?
Mhm.
If your motivation, right, is pricing and terms, that's it. Is it an important factor? Absolutely. But I've seen cases, especially on some of these larger multifamily builds, where we're establishing relationship with someone we know, like, and trust you. They're like, hey, Oscar, we love you. We love your team. We like what you're doing. We're going to go. And then 2 days later, I hear, hey, we got, a quarter better over here or higher leverage over
Mhm.
here. Slight difference. But when you're dealing with a multi-million-dollar project, I get it. It can steer that way. And these are people we haven't quite yet established relationship with. We end up getting the call to help get them refinance them out of that because the relationship on how draws were handled, the delays, and all these other challenges that happen on the back end that we don't hear enough of because they do
Right.
happen because we see it. It allows us to step in and refinance them. But of course, then at that point, it's costing them a little bit more, right? But of course, the benefit there is that it allows us the opportunity to actually establish that relationship with that GC. So don't go cheap. Don't cut corners because it's going to show up.
It's going to show up, and it's always going to cost more money at the end of the day. As you said, it's they're coming back to you once they run into issues because they took the cheaper route from the
Yeah.
get-go, which also I think for us as professionals, that tells us a lot about the client. It's themselves, and if it's someone that we even want to work with. So I think take that into consideration, because it's not, if you're looking to scale in multifamily, this isn't going to be your first rodeo with these people, right? If I'm working with Oscar on one deal, more than likely we're going to work on several. And at least, like, that's what we're hoping for, right? The goal is to keep these long-term relationships, just like, you carry that same mindset with these long-term investments. There aren't like quick turnaround times, and that goes for relationships as well, which is why we emphasize relationships a whole lot, because it really comes down to that. I see it over and over again. If things go south, well, where's the relationship? And that's where you really see it shine, right?
That's where you see people's true character, right? Everything's great
100%.
when everything's great. It's when you're
Right.
working with the right people, when you're truly working with the right people. And when, not if, when challenges arise, how you're able to navigate through these challenges will speak volumes. And I've always said that that's what gives us as a unit an opportunity to shine. Because here's the thing, the beauty of it, that we're going to grow through whatever challenge that is. And like you said, this is not a transactional type of relationship, right? Or conditional, meaning you do this, I do this, or if not, we're cutting throats, versus saying, hey, we're going to grow through this so that at the next property, we don't come across the same challenge. Then I'm saying, hey, Stephanie, I think this might have this same issue that we had on the previous property. Hey, Oscar, I didn't catch that. Great, we're doing this, versus saying, hey, I did my part. You should have caught that. We're watching each other's back. I'll speak for myself as a private money lender. I go deeper over and beyond what a private money lender is. I try and think like the developer. I try and think like the investor. I try and think even as the insurance broker, right? All these layers and bringing up, because that's what brings my stock up, right? If I'm able to help to make sure that the team is not set up for failure, and I'm not just going to not just own, I'm still going to own my role, making sure we're watching each other's back.
Yeah, I think if you can, put all those different glasses on, or hats, or whatever you want to call them, it really makes your life easier. Right now, as you were saying that, I'm doing the same thing. I'm closing one tomorrow or Friday, and this is a 1031 exchange happening in Irvine, and they're going to do their 1031 out in Hawaii. So I was very proactive, at helping my clients find an agent out in Hawaii, making sure that the 1031 exchange coordinator has everything that she needs. I'm like, she's going to ask for this. She's going to need the death certificate. She's going to need this and that. And I'm just being proactive without her reaching out to me or expecting anyone, to kind of waiting on them to ask for stuff. I'm just like, hey, you're going to need this. I'm going to send it to you. And part of that comes with experience too, right?
Yes, absolutely. That's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, I like to beat them to the punch because we've been there, right? I'm dealing with another one that's a probate. They want to sell it without court confirmation. Okay, well, I need a list of documents before we can see if that's possible, right? But I think experience is huge. It really buys you a lot of time, and you you really streamline the process, not only for yourself, but for the client and everyone else involved. And we all want to, continue to do business together. So it just makes it an overall great experience for everyone. And that's kind of how I like to do business. I know that's how you like to do business, because everything else is already stressful as it is for everyone, right? Many times for these investors, they have to make sure that they pay their investors, and these contractors need to make sure they pay their subs. I mean, it's just a lot of people involved.
And you've heard me say this 1,000 times. I will take on a complicated, not impossible, a complicated transaction, whatever that may look like.
A complicated client.
Right? A complicated transaction with the right people any day over something that seems cookie cutter on paper with the wrong people, right?
Yeah. Yep.
We're in this, anyone that's in business, I don't care if it's in real estate, lending, or any type of business, what separates the good from the great are those that have the ability, right, to navigate conflict and solve problems. Not point fingers, but solve problems. And if you're able to do that and you approach business that way, right, you're going to set yourself up for success, especially if you have like-minded individuals in your circle, right? It's a no-brainer at that point. I mean, let's talk about how the benefits on that relationship, not just for myself, I'm going to assume that most private money lenders will do this. Once you establish a working relationship and like, and trust, right? I'll bring it back to me with someone, and we do our first, transaction. And I'm like, hey, I really like this gal, Stephanie. She sees her attention to detail, and we had a few speed bumps along the way. I love the way she handled that. This is someone I want to grow with. And you're also talking about, hey, Oscar, I want to do, 2, 3 or more of these, and then I want to scale up, or I want to do these. I'm like, wow, this is a growth mindset type person, right? And I can see how she can value the relationship. So what happens as soon as we go into the next investment, because you've proven yourself, and especially over time, we're able to sweeten the financing, right? There's a lot of value. It's not a set amount, right? You're able to sweeten, hey, do we need higher leverage on this one? What are we looking to do? Even once the transaction is done, or if we need something a little bit maybe out of the ordinary, we're always open to having a conversation to see if we can tailor a transaction around what it is you're looking to do, right? And that's the beauty of establishing that working relationship, right? Earn your stripes with someone. Over time, your margins will get greater and greater and greater versus cutting people at the throat, cutting people at the ankle, and constantly having to reinvent yourself because you're allowing ego and pride to get in the way.
Yeah, I mean, the ego part, especially.
Ego's not your amigo, right? You've heard me say that.
No. So you have to definitely, just be open to being a team player, and that'll get you, way further than you can alone. Like that one saying, right? If you want to go far, go alone. If you want to go, you know what I mean?
No, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far.
If you want to go fast and alone, just go alone. Oh man, that's too funny. I can't see the chat. Is there anyone on the chat that's maybe asking questions?
Chat. We're doing such a great job that no one has any questions.
That's amazing. Well, I think we're almost getting towards the end of the call, which was supposed to be 30 minutes, but like I said, Oscar and I can talk for hours. This is what we do day in, day out. So feel free to ask any questions. Maybe you're watching this later in the day and you didn't get a chance to watch it live. This will be up on my YouTube, and we'll have short snippets on our Instagram where you guys can get to know us a little bit more. And where we talk a lot about our day-to-day stuff and kind of what we do. And you get to see a lot of the behind the scenes, and then more about who we are as people, right? I think we are in the people business, and many times those true, genuine connections come from like-minded stuff. I mean, I respect Oscar because I always see his posts like with his family and his kids, and I have a kid and I have my fam, and that's enough for me to be like, I'm down to work with him. Right. And so I think that's a good way to stay in touch and vet out the right people.
But how cool is that though? Right. I think a lot of times we I know we're touching on the warm and fuzzy stuff, but how many times do we leave sight of that? Over the years, and I've been at it for a while, I've caught myself when I am not happy with what I'm doing, I realize the first thing I need to do is just audit who I'm doing business with. And sometimes you just need to know when to say no. But just as much effort that's going to take, I honestly think it takes much more effort that once you have a circle established to protect that, right? To
That's
be
so true
intentional,
because
yeah, because you let the wrong apple in and it's going to throw you off. And if I'm stressed over here or someone's just throwing me for a loop, someone that typically I wouldn't let into my ecosystem, it may affect how we do something because I'm not bringing the right attitude, or you know what I
mhm,
mean. And and it's not about perfection, right? But it's when it's the right people, it's powerful, right? And when you
yeah,
see that over time, you protect that. And you touched on one thing that I just recently, and I want to say over just the last 4 years or so, that I've grown to learn and adapt and protect, is that I found myself that when I know and like and trust Stephanie for who you are as a person, I
mhm,
have to like you as a person first, not what you do and looking at your numbers. And because that's the way we all, most of us do business, right? Hey, he or she is a top producer or top investor and want to lean that way. um, I have to know and like the person and who they are as a person. And then I find out, oh, you happen to do this. Hey, you're cool, I'm cool, let's do some cool stuff together. We will be able to face those challenges a lot better versus the surface type relationships where people typically will approach you or nice to you as long as they have something to gain from you. And when they've got what they've needed, they move on to the next. That's definitely, at least I'll speak for myself, that's not a relationship that I want to have. I want to have relationships that, hey, when things are great, things are great. And if you're going through something or we're having some challenges, I know that Stephanie is going to have my best interest, even if I've made a mistake, and vice versa, right? And we're going to grow through this because that's how we're going to continue to grow, not just individually, but as a team, right? Iron sharpens
right.
iron. That's the easiest way to put it.
Yeah, I'll give you another good example of that. I just got back from a 7-day surf trip out in Costa Rica. It was
All that.
amazing. I was out in the
Yeah.
jungle with
Yeah.
like 7 or 8 other women, right? We didn't talk about real estate at all, but it came up like towards the end of the trip. They were asking me questions. I didn't bring it up at all. I was just being
Yeah.
myself, and
Yeah.
we were very present. You even messaged me one of those days and you're like, just be present. Cause I was like, I don't want to
Yeah.
go back home. And you're like, just be present. And
Yeah.
at the end of the trip, they were all asking me questions about real estate. And one of them's like, oh yeah, I have a property out in Nashville and I'm thinking of doing an ADU. And,
Mhm.
I didn't even know that they knew about the ADU stuff.
Mhm.
But this goes to show you that when there's synergy, when there's connection and there's
Mhm.
energy there, it will happen as a byproduct. So I'm already like in the works of working with all 7 women, right? So I came
Awesome.
back from the trip and they're
Beautiful.
inspired to want to learn about investing because they want to be able to keep having more retreats like the one we
Yeah.
just did.
Yeah.
And so they're like, yeah, we can, we should all get together and maybe either create some sort of syndication or like
Mhm.
analyze my portfolio and let me know how I can scale it. I don't know enough about it, but I found, I found it really nice and really cool that they're able to trust me with that. And I didn't even have to bring it up.
Yeah.
It was just us surfing and vibing that, brought that together. So
Yeah.
100% it's who you surround yourself with. Yeah, if you know and like and trust these people and you have a lot of things in common, you will
Yeah.
eventually end up doing business together. So
100%. 100%. Yeah. You just got to be in the right rooms.
that's right. And
Mhm.
speaking of right rooms, I do have, if nobody has questions, I do have a couple things coming up, few announcements. September 8th, we're having an ADU SoCal tour in LA. It's going to be a total of 10 ADU projects. We have a couple multifamily projects that we're going to highlight. So you can, reach out to me. And I am giving away some tickets, but you guys can also just check out SoCalADUtours.com and yeah, and join me for the day and check out some of the projects. I think talking about the numbers is great, but when you see it in person, you really get a feel for not only the like the finishes and the quality of the project, but the size. Like some of you guys may think that 600 square feet is very tiny, but when you look at
Mhm.
something with high ceilings
Mhm.
and high capped-in windows and great finishes, you might think like, wow, I can even see myself living here, in a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 600
Yeah.
square feet ADU. So it changes your perspective seeing them in person.
Yeah.
And then September 10th, I will be at the IMN ADU Forum, which also is it's an ADU event, but strategically like really focusing on the multifamily stuff. So I thought that was very cool. Honored to be one of the speakers speaking on the residential side. But yeah, I mean, that's great also for people who want to really learn about this stuff on a whole other level. And maybe even Oscar will be there so you guys can meet him in person.
Yeah, I'd love to. It's funny you mentioned as far as like, walking it, smelling it, touching it. If you tell me 500 square feet or 600, I'm like, man, that's small. And I've been guilty of that, right? I walked one of them and I'm like, the way these things are built are
Mm-hmm.
genius and very livable, very affordable. Which is, again, I'm a big fan. I'm just used to financing them, and all of a sudden, I actually get to walk through them. Like these things are cool. These things,
Yeah,
are,
you should come.
and we're just tapping the tip of the iceberg on what's to
Right.
come. We're in its infant stages right now, so it's exciting to see kind of what that's going to grow into.
Yep. I mean, you should come down September 8th. If not, I mean, you always see my videos. Make sure you guys, reach out to us on Instagram. I'll be posting a lot of behind the scenes. And yeah, I mean, a lot of like the travel nurses live in some of these 600 square foot ADUs. And, Oscar and I have a mutual friend. He's also an appraiser. Shout out to Sydney. Sydney's worked for a couple of my projects and has helped, with the evaluation piece of it. And every time I talk to him, he's like, dude, the smaller units are producing way more than these bigger units.
Right.
So, for these 400 to 600 square foot ADUs, not only are more cost effective because you avoid a lot of impact fees, but they produce more, right? People aren't having like huge families and multiple kids nowadays. So people really rather pay a premium to stay in a smaller space in the city than having to commute, for 2 to 3 hours at a time. So yeah, I'm all for that. And if you guys come September 8th, you'll know what I'm talking about, and you maybe just want to even live in one. So
yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, I think we can wrap it up there. Again,
I
if
want
you
to
guys,
add. I want to add one thing off topic.
yep.
Just for those men that are listening, a good buddy of mine, consider my brother Rick. We are starting a community for men called Man Up. It's still in its infant stages. We haven't launched the community yet, but we want to start connecting with you. So I invite you to just follow us on Instagram right now. We're just establishing our YouTube page at Man Up 3. Right, Man Up 3 on Instagram. Check us out. In short, right, the dumbed down version of it is just we just want to be encouragers of men, right? To encourage us and empower us to be better business owners, better husbands, better fathers, just better men in general, and talk about what that means, while also trying to create a safe platform to talk about things that sometimes we're uncomfortable talking about, especially as men, right? We're very much introverts and trying to create a safe place. And we're pretty excited. We're going to be launching it here soon. We don't have a launch date, but at the very least, I want to kind of get in your ear on what's to come. So check us out on Instagram. Again, Man Up 3 on Instagram and YouTube as well.
I love that. I really I'm so happy that you're doing that because I grew up with two brothers, and my dad, and they were all very closed off. And being Latinos, you know how it is.
Yeah,
You
culturally.
definitely have, you just have this guard that you never let down. So being able to have a community of men where you're able to be vulnerable, where you're able to leave your ego at the door and really just talk as men, right? And so that you can be better fathers, better whatever, in society, and just integrate a lot better, but really feel your emotions. I'm all for that. So definitely check out that.
Yeah.
And you
and let's be frank,
of,
when things are good at home, right? Because all that comes down to home, right?
Yes.
And whether you're single, your home is here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Things are good at home, or home is if you're a family man like I am, right? You got to start there first. You're looking to start a business. I can tell you one thing: if you're going to spend time right now. Your first business is your business at home. Work on that first and improving that first, right? Then go and start your business, right? Because I know when I'm connected here, things just flow, right? So it's creating that.
You're operating from a higher frequency.
100%, 100%. And it's not just creating a safe place to say, hey, just tell me. It's also in counsel too, right? Making sure that you're also being counseled the importance of, bringing you back to your marriage, bringing you back the importance. It's not like, hey, I'm having these issues. Really, oh man, you shouldn't have to deal with that. Let's go grab a beer. That's not healthy. That's not what we're doing. It's create a
Right.
safe environment for men to open up, encourage doing things that you love to do with like-minded men, right?
That's another thing that I have to give it up to you for, because I think I'm on my 6 month sober journey, no alcohol, and I feel amazing. I feel very
Yes.
clear.
Mhm.
And that was definitely, something that I never thought I'd be able to do, because drinking is like a big part of our social life. But
Mhm.
I'd say having, a few like relationships that are also on their sober journey has helped me. So tap into a community like that who's just open for
Mhm.
you to heal or to be
Mhm.
heard or to be seen, so that
Mhm.
you can start off with yourself first and then show up for your family, and then everything else follows. So
Amen
I
to
love
that.
that. I think I didn't share my community, so you just reminded me of that as well. I
Mhm.
have the ADU Play community, which is free on my Instagram. But then I also have a school community, which is also called the ADU Play. And there's a course there. So if you want to get started as an ADU specialist, or even an investor who wants to really niche down into ADUs, I have a whole course, 10 modules that you can have access to. It is a membership platform. If you guys are interested in that, reach out as well. But we'll be back. We'll be back with another call. I see Lisa joined. Lisa will have this recording. She's part of my ADU community, and she's also a developer. So somebody that I think you should connect with, Oscar.
Mhm.
And yeah, so we'll come back, and this one will be saved on our YouTube channel. We'll share it, and we'll see you guys soon.
Peace and love.
Bye, guys.